Before we start on our zoning ordinance, got a couple of housekeeping things to do. We need to vote to approve the road district tax levy for this year, for next year.
I'll make that
Got a
motion.
motion from Mark,
I'll second it.
second from Roger. Any discussion on that motion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. We need to also pass the township tax levy for next year.
That's got an extra O in it right there.
Oh,
Just so
thank
you
you.
know.
Thank
I'll make that motion.
Got a motion from Mark, a second.
Second.
Second from Samantha. Any discussion on that motion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Gary Luth was the chairman of the zoning commission. I'm going to ask Gary if he's got anything to say for the board, for the benefit of the board about that process.
I apologize for my voice. I've been fighting a cold for a while. Really didn't realize that Jim was going to ask this, so I didn't have any prepared remarks. However, the council and I prepared a transmittal, basically, to the Township Board, and I'm going to read the two paragraphs that I authored out of the transmittal. And then maybe I'll say a couple more words. This was written about 3 weeks ago, I think, is when Bob and I talked about it. To Newman Township Board of Trustees, I would like to offer my appreciation to all members of the board for their support through the entire process of the zoning committee's establishment and deliberation. First, your willingness to provide legal counsel to Robert Lenz was critical in helping the commission to produce a viable and credible, relatively simple zoning ordinance. Secondly, I believe the board deserves credit for selecting 5 individuals to serve on the commission who, by their various interests and backgrounds, reflected and represented the general population of the residents of Newman Township well. Thirdly, providing the commission a competent recording secretary helped the commission to do its work quickly and thoroughly. Finally, I wish all of you well as you consider how to proceed with the document the commission has placed before you. Then I had a note also, which this is public record. I've signed this. I'll give this copy to Attorney Lenz as I sit down. This is to the Newman Township Zoning Commission members. I want to thank all of you publicly for the time and effort each of you devoted towards developing a zoning ordinance for Newman Township. Even though we were not able to reach a unanimous decision regarding the final product, I am satisfied that each of you provided your honest thoughts and feelings and that you sought to do what you felt was best for the people of Newman Township. Interestingly, our work and discussion seemed to mirror the thoughts expressed by those in attendance the night of the vote by the electors to establish the commission. Perhaps that is a good reflection on the entire process and on the democratic process in general. Once again, a sincere thank you for all of the efforts each of you contributed as the ordinance was debated. Regardless of the final decision made on the ordinance by the trustees, I'm proud of the effort the commission made to produce a document that reflected the will of the people. Gary Luth, Chairman, Newman Township Zoning Commission. So that's kind of a summary of where I'm at. Obviously, I don't live under a basket, and I know that the product that we're forwarding to the Township Board is one that's controversial, and that's fine. There's certainly plenty of room for disagreement on what should or should not happen in regard to wind farms in Newman Township. That's debatable. What I don't think is debatable is the process that was used, or at least I hope it's not. I think the process that was used was one that followed the law to the T, from the petitioning process to the town meeting, to how the town meeting was operated, to the vote that took place at the town meeting, to how the commission conducted its business. And obviously, one of the most controversial parts of the commission was the WEX portion. And I will tell you that it was addressed twice, or 2/3 of it was addressed twice by the commission members, not just once as the rest of it was. So I think everybody had a fair and equal chance to share their opinions and their ideas on what the final product should be. Not everybody was happy with the final product. The vote was 4-1, basically, to go to the public hearing. After the public hearing, the vote was 3-2 to refer the product that is in front of the board tonight. So I feel positive about how this document was developed. The Township Board now has a job to do, and I have confidence that they will address it the same way in which the commission members did their job. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank the zoning commission. They spent, over the course of probably a month and a half, spent a couple nights a week here and put a lot of time and a lot of thought into this. So I would like to thank Gary Luth, Tony Kincaid, Perry Alvin, Jeff Kincaid, Russ Brooks, and Rick Dorset for the time they've put in and the effort. We appreciate it. You weren't very well paid for the time you spent here, and it wasn't near enough, I understand that, but thank you for everything you did. I'd also like to thank Diane Kincaid for the excellent job she did recording those meetings and making a record of that. That was a big job, and I think she did a wonderful job also. So at this point, I'd like to ask Bob Lenz to tell us what our process is from here on out, what we can and can't do with this ordinance that's been presented to us.
Okay, if I may I piggyback on Gary's comments and yours as well?
Yeah.
I've been practicing law 55 years, and I've worked with lots of public bodies and lots of commissions. This zoning commission, all the members led by Gary, were conscientious and as effective and sincere and working in good faith as anybody I've ever worked with through all that many years. So you were, the board, you were well served by the people you appointed. And Diane was immensely helpful. The minutes of those meetings are thorough and complete, so our record keeping is good. And the report that Gary highlighted that's been provided to you is required by the statute. That is a job, the commission is to come up with a work product and then propose it to the board, the township board. And then to respond, Jim, to your suggestion about what you can do, obviously you first need to study it, and then you can approve it the way it is, you can amend it and modify it, or you can send it back to the commission and say do some more work and maybe give them some guidance on it. So you have broad legislative discretion in terms of how you want to respond to the commission's recommendation. I would also like to point out, as a sort of, if I may supplement what Gary said to the board and to the public, which is that this is a substantial body of work. The only part of it that was really controversial was the wind farm part of it. And we kind of knew going into it that might be the case, okay? But what you should know is that the first decision your commission had to make was what kind of a zoning ordinance are we going to do? It wasn't going to be only about wind. It was going to be, should we have a complete, comprehensive, kind of total global sort of zoning ordinance, or should we not? If we were to adopt a comprehensive zoning ordinance, which we would, it would be much more controlling than what our citizens are used to. And in a typical such ordinance, you've got a district restricted for residential development. You've got a district restricted for multifamily. You've got a business district. You've got other industrial districts. You've got other kinds of districts. Well, this is predominantly an agricultural community. So what we decided to do was to really only have one district, which is agriculture. And of course, this zoning commission couldn't do anything about the prerogatives of the municipality, so we're talking about the area outside of the boundaries of the city of Newman. So we have one district, but any other use that would be developed in the geography and geographic limits of our township would be by what's called a special use or a conditional use process. You would have a zoning board of appeals, someone would file a petition for permission to build a subdivision or put up an ADM plan or to build something. And so we tried to make this as usable and as customer-friendly, as citizen-friendly as we could make it. I do think if we had adopted a more traditional, complete zoning ordinance, you might find yourself with a civil war where people reject, because every time you turn around, you got to say Mother May I to do something. So we tried to avoid overcomplicating it. And so the commission made what I, in my opinion, was a wise decision. Keep it simple, okay? So the only complicated parts relate to either the wind farm portion or the other special uses that we could anticipate that might be controversial. And so there's a fair amount of detail, for example, about building a mobile home park and some other uses of that kind. But even those were not, as far as the commission was concerned, were not controversial. We just wanted to make them adequate. So that's kind of my take on what your commission did, and that's what's being tendered to me. So to, again, go back to answer Jim's question, from a legal standpoint, the statute says that when you receive this, you can do almost anything you want to with it. You can approve it the way it's written, you can modify it, you can change some words here and there, or change some provisions. You can come up with your own, you can modify it significantly, which would sort of be like rewriting it, or you can send it back to the commission for further work. I don't think they're eager to have it back, but because they put in a lot of hours producing what they have for you. So does that help?
Yes. And the other thing I would like to ask Rob to comment on, I know you and I have discussed that Murdoch Township lawsuit. Wonder if you have any comments on that and any recommendations on what we should do because of that situation.
Well, I didn't personally attend that hearing. I was busy doing something else. But I was able to get a copy of the court reporter's transcript, so I have studied that. And I studied the original pleadings, the complaint and the attachments that were originally filed by Broadlands. The lawyers also presented to Judge Kennedy legal memoranda, but I haven't yet seen or the copies of those. But they were referred to in the arguments. It's reflected in the transcript. And the judge made comments on them, so I have a pretty good idea what took place there. Basically, what Broadlands did in their pleadings was to ask the court to grant both a restraining or a temporary restraining order, which is like a short-term injunction, and a preliminary injunction. And there was no real controversy about the facts. That is, the pleadings were under oath, and they had an affidavit attached to it, which is a sworn statement, factual statement. So most of the discussion and the argument, according to the transcript, was about legal issues. And we had identified at the very outset that the number one legal issue to be addressed in any lawsuit, this is before either township had, when you barely got started, and even before Murdoch had adopted their ordinance, or had even developed an ordinance. The legal issue here is whether, the question is whether or not the building permit ordinance that the county adopted in 2007, I think, or 9, and then amended it a couple of years later, does that give exclusive jurisdiction to deal with wind or not? And there are arguments on both sides of that. The decision the judge made, based on what I saw in the transcript, was that he felt that Broadlands had not adequately provided sufficient evidence to meet some of the requirements of the temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction. But the judge did render an opinion that there's a likelihood of success in their lawsuit ultimately, because the judge felt that Broadlands had the better side of the argument with respect to the issue of exclusivity. That is which government has authority to deal with siting turbines in Douglas County? Is it the county or is it the township? So there's no argument that each township, Murdoch and our township, have full broad authority to deal with zoning. The legal issue is whether we can include in our zoning ordinance, or whether they can include in theirs, controls over wind. And one of the reasons that is an issue, that it's what lawyers would call a case of first impression. It has not yet been resolved by a higher court anywhere in the state of Illinois. And the reason for that is that several years ago, the state of Illinois legislature amended the county zoning ordinance and the municipality's zoning ordinance to give them what appears to be exclusive authority to deal with wind. I say appears to be because it never quite says that, but it looks that way. And Judge Kennedy opined that he thought that that would probably give Broadlands a likelihood of success. Now, I fully expect the lawyers from Murdoch to argue about that, and I think no matter how that turns out, one side or the other is going to appeal to the 4th District Appellate Court, so we're going to be a year or more away from knowing the outcome. Now, the implications of all of that for us, it seems to me, that it would be my recommendation to you as the board that you shouldn't be in a hurry to get into a lawsuit. And it seems to me that you can do whatever you want to with the proposed ordinance from the commission with all of the options that I shared with you earlier. But my advice to this township board would be to monitor that lawsuit and see how that goes. And you can study, you can have a kind of understanding about what you want to do with a zoning ordinance. But my recommendation would be to just stop them short of actually adopting a zoning ordinance that includes wind. That way, if that lawsuit turns out that it's favorable to townships, you're ready to go. Just pull the trigger. And if it turns out that it's not, that the county has exclusive jurisdiction, which is what Broadlands is arguing, then you've dodged a bullet and you haven't had the expense and the turmoil and the question of the lawsuit. Now, if you want to get into a lawsuit, Murdoch might welcome some help. It looks like you're supporting them, but that's a governmental decision for you to make.
Does anybody have any questions at this point for the attorney?
I have one question. If we did decide to go ahead and do this and then there was litigation brought against us, does our insurance as a township cover any of those expenses as far as legal fees and whatnot, or is the township on its own based on what we have on hand to do this?
Well, very, very early on, I asked Jim to check with your carrier, and he has an answer to that question.
Yes, they will cover the first $50,000 of our attorney fees if we are sued. Bob has indicated to me that would be a drop in the bucket if we're sued.
Well, I wouldn't say drop it, but it wouldn't cover all of it.
Yeah.
You know, whether you hire me or a real lawyer, it wouldn't cover all of it.
But, you know, that's a very expensive process. And, you know, we're just giving you folks something to think about. And I think it might be a good idea to be very cautious in this and try to avoid the expense to the taxpayers of a lot of legal fees, and not only legal fees, but I've been told that someone involved in a lawsuit, he says, you think you've spent a lot of time on zoning, you'll spend a lot of time on a lawsuit, correct?
That's correct.
I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I think it would be very prudent, not just for us, but for our taxpayers to sit back and look at that issue.
Don't you feel that the taxpayers have already spoken, though, that want zoning?
Yes, they have. But the issue is, can we do a WEX ordinance? See, that's, the zoning isn't.
That's why they did the zoning.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's up to this board to decide how they want to proceed. I didn't put anything about voting on the agenda for tonight because I think you folks ought to think that issue over. I don't think it would be fair to ask you to make a decision tonight on how we're going to proceed with this without having all the information. But I think we've got some issues here to think about and to deal with. Anybody else have any questions?
I do. So if we vote the ordinance as it stands, as it came from the commission, what then is the process for amendments to that ordinance?
It would be no different than any other governmental decision that you make. If you're going to conduct a public hearing on a proposal to amend or modify it, you just notice it up and study it and take a vote on it.
Okay. I know, so when When zoning goes into place, then a zoning board is created.
Yes, and then you need to hire a zoning administrator
Correct.
as well.
Correct. So then does that zoning board take up the issue of amendments if it arises, or is it just the township board if somebody has a feeling they don't like something?
Well, you could probably assign that function to the zoning board of appeals. The typical use of a zoning board of appeals is to consider a special use application or a permit or some violation. But I'm sure that if you directed your zoning board of appeals to conduct hearings on proposed amendments, they'd be in a position to do that, sure.
But the board could do it.
You could delegate that to zoning board of appeals, and they don't make a final decision.
What I'm asking is, this board can make the decision though, without going to the Board of Appeals, is what you're saying? If we wanted to make changes in it at a later date,
Sure,
we can do that.
You don't have to go to the zoning board.
Okay,
but-
good enough.
But if you wanted to delegate that function, it would be
We could.
sort of like the commission that
Right.
you just did.
Right.
Anybody else have any questions on that?
I think with that being said, that I'm ready to do something, to vote, whatever, and we can't tonight,
No.
then let's set a meeting.
Okay, well, we're not quite finished yet. Yeah. I thought that we will present to you this ordinance that I've had printed up. I want to have some cautious comments here. As you folks know, I met with Bob Lenz on November the 20th. My purpose in that meeting was, and I told him this ahead of time, was my goal when we are finished with this process for both sides to say, we didn't get what we wanted, but they did the best they could do. We have a responsibility here to represent both sides of this issue. We have a responsibility to meet in the middle on this issue. We've got property owner A, property owner B, with a property line in between them. Both property owners have the right to do with their property what they want to do. And it's our job to be right in the middle of that. The key here is we don't know where the middle is or what the middle is, but both sides have a right to do with their property what they wish. Am I correct?
Well, you're not legally required to hit the middle, but that's what I call a prudent political decision to make.
Yeah, but I think that's what we need to do now. When I met with Bob, then on the 20th, he went through the Wex portion of that ordinance with me, and he gave me a copy of it that I've got here tonight, where he underlined the issues that he thought were problem areas in that ordinance. And we went through those areas, and you've got a copy of the email he sent me after that meeting, showing what changes he thought we might want to look at. And then I met with him on Friday the 30th and finalized that. And before I even got home from Bloomington, I had this proposed ordinance in my email. I was at a disadvantage because I was leaving the next morning for 2.5 days. Didn't read the ordinance, and I sent it to FedEx to be printed, so the printed copy you've got has those changes, which Bob was more efficient than I had planned on. I hadn't planned on that. My goal was to have those proposals to have discussion points. But anyway, you've got access to the original ordinance, and you've got the email where the changes we had talked about, and those are in this current ordinance. And I think you folks need to go home and study those and go through them, and we will meet and discuss those one by one and go through that.
I guess, if I may, I want to respond to what you just said, because I have a slightly different recollection of the dynamics of our interaction.
Okay.
Jim came to me and said that he thought there were some issues here that perhaps needed to be modified or amended. And so the email from me is a list of the points that we discussed
Right.
that you had raised. And then my role was to see whether, from a legal standpoint, any of those could be done.
Right.
And once I understood what change you were considering, then I helped you write the language for that. But I don't want the commission to think that I turned on them
Right, right,
and modified their proposal.
right.
That wasn't my role either with the commission or with Jim. So I hope I'm right about that.
Right, yeah, I agree. But there are issues there that I think we need to talk about and go through. Now, I don't think it is appropriate, and we can start on that tonight if you want to do that, but I think it would be to your advantage to go home and study those and go through those.
I already have.
You already have?
I've got, yeah.
Okay. Everybody?
Have you?
I've looked at it. My concern is we let the process work as the process was supposed to work.
Right.
And the zoning commission brought us a product that was a product, I think, and has been mentioned here several times, of a vote taken by the township people, of a fair board put together to do the zoning. And they have brought us a product, and I don't feel like it is our job as 4 or 5 people to sit here and say, now we're gonna pull it apart and I know we can, I know we have the right to.
But they did that with your help, right?
Yes, it did, sure.
Okay.
So I guess my concern is we're turning around and redoing work. I mean, these are some very significant changes to the WEX part of the ordinance. What's been proposed. I guess I really don't have a question. I'm just making a general comment about my feelings about this. I feel like that what the process worked by the law and as it was supposed to. And I just feel like that we as the township need to consider that there was a lot of work done with it. And if these are major changes we want to make, then my feeling is, and I know the commission doesn't want it back, but they did the initial work. I want them to say, okay, if this is what the township's really looking at, then here's why. You know, yeah, we considered that, but here's why we gave you what we gave you. Because we've had a public hearing and the public got to speak, but the commission and the township board have never had that meeting. We've had the comments from Gary that he made, and we've had the information given to us, but we've never had that opportunity to say, okay, why is this like it is? Like what, the 5 of you obviously came to some kind of a decision. I mean, they did. They came to a decision. They voted. The vote, it came to us as it is. So there was a reason why. I just don't feel it would be prudent for us to sit here and start making changes line by line when they have made that decision. I mean, does that make any, did I just make any sense? I feel like I kind of talked in a circle. I apologize.
I think a little
I just
bit.
feel like the process has worked as it has, and by doing this and making these significant changes, we're circumventing that process.
Exactly. And
So my question is, so you want to go with the original ordinance and that was proposed by the zoning commission?
Well,
Is that
I feel like the process worked as it should, and that would be my opinion.
Okay.
Is that, you know, we honor the work that they have done, and that the, you know, the process from day one went as the process was to go.
And alluding back to what Samantha brought up earlier about we do have the power to make changes. If we figure out something isn't working or isn't right, we can change it or send it back to them, right, Bob?
Yes?
But if we adopt the zoning ordinance, the zoning commission is now finished.
Right, we
Right.
get
Would have to
to
make
a
changes now to the
point,
zoning
yes,
commission.
Right.
yes.
Jake, you got anything to say? Roger?
Well, I attended all those meetings of the commission, and I listened to the debate, both sides of it. It was brought up at least 2 of the meetings that the purpose they were there for was to make sure they stopped the wind farm from being there. You actually said it yourself, you just laughed at me, but you said that yourself. Our charge is to stop the wind farm. Yeah, I think so, I said here, I've got it written down. So, my thought is, okay, that was the idea that some of them went in there on. What has happened since that time with Murdoch, we now know where they're headed. We know that they've already been to court once, and I'm pretty sure that's not gonna stop with that one trip to the courthouse. We've already spent quite a bit of money out of our township fund And that is, as was said earlier, the taxpayers' money.
Right, but I don't feel, if it's taxpayers' money and the taxpayers feel like we need this or they need this, that a lawsuit shouldn't scare us off.
That
Anyway, I feel
vote that
about
was done that night, there were 705 voters.
And everyone had the right to attend.
That's right.
A lot of people didn't know about it, and the paper that was sent out had a lot
Hey.
of misinformation.
I'll be honest, it shocked me that night. It turned out the way it did.
But that was 12%
With
of
the
the
people that
voters.
were there, but that's the way it did, Roger.
I understand that, but they were told, if you come to this, the federal government is the only reason we would be having windmills at all. And if you come to this meeting,
Yeah.
you'll be able to regulate hog farms and other large livestock operations, which is a state function. So the people came, I mean, you gotta admit, that's a tug on the heartstrings of a lot of people. We've been through this already. Somebody wanted a hog farm north of town. We've got one out south of town. People were not happy. So they came thinking that was something that we were gonna be able to do at the township level ourselves.
I
It
think
says so right here.
instead of arguing, we just need to set up our next meeting fairly soon to vote on it and be done with it. Either way.
When could everybody meet?
Let me make it, I'm going to try to be helpful here.
Yes,
and
thank you.
I'm not taking sides. I do think that whether you adopt the ordinance word for word that the commission presented, which is what Samantha is suggesting, and maybe you too, or whether you consider all or any of what I'm going to refer to as Jim's suggestions,
Yeah.
because it's emailed to me with a summary of the talking points that we've talked about. I would still recommend that you can reach a consensus on it, but you ought to consider whether it's prudent to adopt it, because that is an invitation to an unnecessary lawsuit. You can have it on standby, and you've agreed not to change it, if that's what you agree to do. But don't be in a, my advice is, don't be in a hurry to adopt it, otherwise you're volunteering to be in a lawsuit that you don't need to be in. You can monitor that Murdoch lawsuit as it goes along. It's like any other public function. And if you adopt this ordinance, you're not going to do anything for or against a wind farm until that case is resolved, or until the county does something. So you can monitor all of that, pay attention to what's going on, and at the right time, you can either adopt it or not. But approving it and then having it on standby strikes me as a more prudent decision.
So basically,
I'm not addressing the merits of what you should do, but when to do it.
a vote on it, but we're not gonna adopt it, basically.
You can approve it in principle, you can approve it in form, just don't adopt it in official ordinance. And I'm just trying to keep you out of court.
Right.
That's the only reason I'm volunteering this comment at all. Okay.
And I think that's very prudent advice. We can have a zoning ordinance ready to go. Just don't adopt it till we know whether or not we can do it or not. Sure saves our taxpayers a lot of money.
Now, if I may, Jim, just thinking out loud with you here, so you feel free to ignore whatever I'm saying.
No, that's fine.
Is that one thing you might consider is why not have a joint meeting with this board and your commission, and have the commission members share their thoughts about what I'm going to call here as Jim's suggestions, and see whether there is some meeting place in between the two. And then you might end up with a better ordinance. I don't know for sure. That's an opinion that you wouldn't be able to form until you're done with that process. But there's nothing, no rule, nothing in the law that says that you can't do that. And that way you're sharing your ideas about these suggestions from Jim with the commission, and see if there's some give and take there. You might not want to do that, but that's a way home. I'm just trying to find a way out of an impasse for you here.
Well, we aren't ready for public comment yet.
I don't even know whether you would approve of that, but I would.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm open to suggestions.
So you're saying we need to be prudent because we don't want to be sued immediately.
Yeah.
We want to wait and see what's going on with Murdoch. I guess what I would like to is to, I don't know that we would use Bob to litigate. I don't know if you're a litigating attorney, if we were to go into that, or if we would use someone different.
Our insurance company would choose an attorney for us.
So our insurance company would choose it, so we wouldn't know so we'd have no way to pick our litigator and be able to have a discussion ahead of time
I
as
don't
to,
think
can
so.
we make our arguments in court? I mean, I guess that's, legally, and I've read the statutes, the township has the right to create wind, but what I'm hearing from you is it's not clear whether the county has jurisdiction over that or the township. Is that correct? From what you said earlier?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's a case of first impression. It's never been resolved at an appellate or Illinois Supreme Court level. There are arguments on both sides of that. And I'm not telling you necessarily, I did flunk crystal ball in law school, so I can't predict the outcome of that court process. But it's a close question. It's a serious question that cannot be ignored. And I think if anybody says that they can guarantee you how that's going to turn out, they're blowing smoke. It's complicated.
Right, I understand.
Now, is any other state, it happened in any other state where,
I don't know of any other jurisdiction that has the circumstances that we have. For example, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this for you, but the legislature modified the county zoning ordinance to give it jurisdiction over siting wind turbines. So does that mean that the township can't do it? They modified the city ordinance to give them jurisdiction within 1.5 miles. They modified the county ordinance, but he didn't touch the township ordinance, township statute. So does that mean they didn't want the townships to have that authority?
I think it's probably because the townships don't have zoning, most,
Yeah,
almost all,
yeah.
almost all.
Well, and obviously, if the county would adopt zoning, we're out of business, because the state law, then the county would preempt completely. And our county has not decided to do that. There's an interesting question whether the ordinance adopted by Douglas County that's called a building permit ordinance, whether it is in fact the equivalent of a zoning ordinance without the title. So sometimes labels don't really matter, it's the substance that controls. And that was one of the things that the lawyers argued and the judge was mulling about if you attended the hearing or read the transcript. So there's some touch and go issues here. So that's the water you're swimming in. It's complicated. So I made this suggestion about a joint meeting with the commission just to see if you could come up with something that would be mutual compromise. You might not want to do that.
Although, I'm going to make a big assumption here, and I know you said you don't have a crystal ball, so maybe you can't do it, but if our zoning, even if we tweak and change, or we go back to zoning commission and work, if any of it's tougher than what the county has, aren't we subject to the lawsuit anyway? I mean, isn't that what the argument is, that we don't have the right to do it?
You're only going to be in the lawsuit if you adopt an ordinance.
Right.
What I'm talking about is seeing whether between the commission and this board, you can negotiate something that is more agreeable.
yeah, but what she's saying is
And
that
then put it on hold.
if
Oh,
it's
you're
not-
still saying put something on hold,
Okay.
not
Yeah.
find something more agreeable and vote.
He's saying we could have something ready to go, so the minute that lawsuit is resolved, we can have that.
But if the application is given to the wind farm prior to us adopting anything, it wouldn't matter what we adopted, the county's ordinance stands, correct?
Well, only if the court says that the county has exclusive jurisdiction to do it. And if the court deems that what the county does by approving the application is merely a building permit, then it may not be exclusive. That's one of the things that's unknown here. You're having the fun of working in the middle of something with a lot of unknowns. That's why you get the big bucks, I guess, and deal with these complicated issues. I don't even make light of it, it's a serious matter.
I understand.
I'm on your side, meaning this board. I want you to have an ordinance that works, that's fair and reasonable for your citizens, and property owners. And I'd also like to see you do that in such a way so that you don't find yourself involved in unnecessary litigation. But again, that's your call to make, not mine. That's merely my advice. You can ignore my advice and it won't offend me a bit. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on that? Or any other issues while Bob is here? Certainly the time to ask those questions. If not, can we set a date for a meeting to vote on this issue? I still think it's wise to consider these issues before we vote.
I was gonna say, everybody's checking for availability.
I'm retired. I don't have anything going on.
So that means you'll be able to, we'll have to
The tube
call
in my
you to
calendar's
get you
fuller than it was before.
to get you out of bed.
Yeah.
There's a hydrant out there with your name on it.
Midnight.
Midnight.
I want to be there.
Let's see.
I
And
assume
you're
we
the one
wouldn't want to
with
do
ball
it.
schedules and stuff.
Well, I mean, I could work around that, the evening, I mean, if we're doing evenings, a lot of the tournament stuff, as far as like next Thursday and Friday wouldn't be,
I was working about next Thursday, the 27th.
let's see.
I'm out of town,
Oh,
but
that's right, I forgot about that. That's right, you told me that. But we can deal with that too, or unless you want to put it off till the next week, but,
You said the 27th?
Yeah, but she'll be gone. We need her.
We can appoint another secretary. Not that I don't like that you take the minutes, but,
Yeah.
I mean, if we can, that's fine, then we'll move it.
we can
I mean,
we can have somebody else do it, I would think. It's up to you folks, when you want to do it.
I mean, I don't,
Well, she's been doing it all along and knows the ins and outs and what to put where, so. I would suggest we stick with her if we can. When are you coming back?
the
31st, you said?
30th,
30th?
well, you don't want to meet at midnight.
Yeah.
Probably not.
How's the 9th or 10th look? Is that too far off?
what about the
Second.
3rd? About just a week later? The 2nd or the 3rd?
I'm good.
On the third, I could do either one of them.
I couldn't do the 2nd, but I could do the 3rd.
Do the third.
At 6 o'clock?
Is that a Thursday?
Yeah.
I'm not saying we necessarily need to have a joint meeting, but do we want to ask for all of the zoning commission board members to come if there's questions or clarification, or can we just have Gary sit with us to clarify that? I mean, I don't.
Well, that was
I
going
just-
to be my next question. What exactly do you want to vote on at that meeting?
Well, I'd like to have on the agenda the issue to vote on the zoning, so if we
Yes.
decide to take it up, it's
So
on the
vote on
agenda.
a completed zoning ordinance, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, just because it's on the agenda doesn't mean it has to happen, but it has to be on the agenda for it to happen, so.
Right. What else? I mean, is that the only thing you want to vote on? Or do you want to have a joint meeting that night with the zoning commission also, or not? I kind of gather there's no preference here.
I don't know, like I said, if there's any issues we're gonna talk about changing, it would be nice to have them sitting here.
Some
Because my
advantages to
question
that.
would be for them. You know, what
Okay.
what
This
was
is
the original
the 18
premise?
issues, is what this is. It's
These are
basically
the
what was
things that were
changed on it.
changed.
18 items.
Do you want
So
to,
I don't know how we need to then post the meeting, whether it's a township meeting and we've invited these commission members, like I wanna make sure we're following the Open Meetings Act correctly, so. I don't know.
It would be our meeting and they would be in attendance. I mean,
right,
it wouldn't be.
that's my.
It would not be their meeting.
Right.
Right. It would be our meeting, and I'm asking these questions so I know what to put on the agenda.
Right,
So,
right.
Don't you think they've already gave us what they want, that we could go through these 18 items ourselves as a board?
do you want to go through that or not? That's,
Well,
Be here? Is Bob gonna be here?
I don't know.
I think that's, I don't know that we'd need him.
That's what I was getting ready to
No,
say.
I don't
no
know that you
offense,
need-
but
No,
I
I'm not
don't, I mean,
offended.
if we've really gathered
That's what I
the
was getting ready to say.
information.
I mean, I will give you that if you wanna go through these 18.
Understand.
Okay,
Next meeting, we'll do that,
okay.
as long as we have that where we can vote on it on the agenda. I'm good with that. Not saying that it will be done. We may take Bob's suggestion.
So we also want to vote on whether to, we can vote on an ordinance, but we want to vote on when we want to adopt that. For example, that night, or when this lawsuit is, we want to vote on that, when that lawsuit is completed.
Okay,
Do
if
we actually vote though?
My
We just leave the
suggestion,
document
if
set,
you-
right?
If and when you vote, and the lawsuit is still pending, you could vote to approve it as to form, but just don't adopt an ordinance. It's the
Approve
ord-
it as to form.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the language to use, approving it as to form, but you're not adopting an ordinance, you're approving this draft as to form. And save the ordinance till you're ready to either be sued or you're clear that you're not going to be sued depending on the outcome of the litigation. Now, if you really want to have the fun of enjoying a lawsuit, well, go ahead and adopt it, but the ordinance, but my suggestion is to have it ready to go.
Okay.
And when is that meeting? I know
The 3rd of January?
I've been disinvited and I'm perfectly happy with that. Okay.
we're trying to save some
It's not
money,
the first
Bob.
time I've been sued, so it's okay with me.
Is there anything else we need to cover that night?
So
Ms. Method?
both will be on the agenda. To approve it and to approve it as to form. Do both have to be on the agenda or can just, it
Well, the
suffices
form-
that and then
We would be
decide?
approving it to
To
form
form, yeah, not.
and
I
not
understand,
adopting
but
it
if we
as
wanna
an
adopt-
ordinance.
If we want to adopt it that night, it needs to be on the
On the
agenda.
ordinance,
Both need to
right,
be on the
exactly.
agenda. That's what I'm trying to
I'm
get
good
clear.
there,
Okay.
is to have both on the
Right.
agenda,
Right, okay.
and it may not happen, or it may happen.
Anything else that we ought to have on the agenda that night? Go ahead.
If I, at the risk of repeating myself, the reason I suggested consulting with the commission, whether you call it a joint meeting or just having it available, is they've given a lot of thought to this.
Absolutely.
But I don't know that they have seen all or any of these specific suggestions that is on this list.
Can we provide them
Right.
with a copy of
Of
that
course, you
before the
are. And
3rd?
by the way, this was,
I
this
think we
was,
should.
this was a memo from me to Jim to summarize his conversation with me. So, sort of like talking points, but it ought to be shared with them
Okay.
and get the benefit of their thinking about it.
I can do that.
I mean, they bring a lot to the table. They've wrestled with these things.
Yep.
So I think it would be, if they're willing to do it, they will be very helpful, very constructive.
And I'll make it a point to invite them to that meeting.
Yeah, and if we can just get them this
Yeah,
as
they
soon
just-
as we can.
Yeah,
I mean, if
sure.
it's in an email form, it should be
Yeah,
pretty easy
I
to
can
get
have
to
that
them.
done tomorrow. Anything else? If not, I would like to open it up to public comments. Anybody can speak, but we're going to have a 3-minute timer.
I've got one.
Right behind you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm one of the zoning commissioners who attended all the zoning hearings and participated in the discussion of the code. And I'm confused about why Jim Sandstrom would have gone to an attorney at the expense of the township before the board had any opportunity to review our work product and begin amending it and asking the attorney to draft an ordinance that is significantly different than ours, much looser and easier on the potential licensees for a wind energy conversion system. And as far as I understand, although his his meeting was known, the purpose of the meeting was not known to the township board at that time. So I have a question whether that should even be at township expense, first of all. I have a question of why he would ask us to serve on the commission and then undermine the work of the commission and do an end run around it before the board had any opportunity to even see our work brought up. And my suspicion is if Jim's ordinance hadn't been mistakenly sent to Gary Luth, we probably wouldn't have known about it until maybe a little before tonight or even this evening. So that's a procedural question, it's a question of process, and I would like to know why that occurred. We considered many issues in our hearings. I don't think we had a unanimous vote on anything to do with the wind energy conversion system sections. And so to rehash all this stuff with the commission is probably a waste of the commission's time. Because we've been through this, we've thought about it, we've taken votes on it. Our votes were almost never unanimous, so different points of view were stated and discussed. And I think, frankly, Jim, I just think this is an attempt to delay what we're trying to do here. You have an obvious bias in favor of EDP renewables, and so does Roger. And so I just think that's what's going on here. I think if you allow the threat of a lawsuit to prevent you from passing an ordinance, then the EDP renewables is running this township and not the township board. That's my comment.
Perry, I will have to back Jim up on that. Jim talked to me prior to talking to Bob Lentz, and what Jim told me is that he was going to get Bob's input on a few of the items that were touchy to see what Bob thought.
But if I heard
Now,
Bob right,
yes, I don't
the
know
ideas
that.
came from Jim to Bob.
Okay, granted, maybe, but I want to say that I knew that, before he went up, that
Okay.
that's
All right.
what he was going to talk to Bob about.
Okay.
I don't think that the way Jim explained it to me is that Bob sent it to him and Jim sent it out to us, not knowing it was a revised copy.
Right.
And I think Gary Luth figured that out, because
Yeah.
Gary got the same thing.
We were trying
And
to figure
Gary
out why the
instantly
ordinance-
let us know, what
Yeah.
was going on. I don't think it was something that Jim was trying to hide.
Okay.
That was never my intention.
I don't think that was his
We were trying to figure out why the
intention.
ordinance didn't read the way we had passed it.
Right. That's why it was brought up in discussion tonight about your commission's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My situation
are-
was merely a time situation. I received that on a Friday evening. I was leaving town the next morning. Our meeting was originally scheduled for Wednesday, and I had to get them printed up. Didn't look at them, and I should have, but I was a time crunch, and I didn't have printed what I thought I was having printed. That's all it amounted to. My goal was to protect the township. Make sure we didn't
As
have.
far as being biased, I don't know about that part. But
Okay.
I'd really like to be next before him because I had my hand up earlier.
Go ahead,
That's all.
Jim.
Thanks, Russ. The only question I really have, and perhaps you can explain this to me, on the setbacks, on H, under setbacks, it has under number 3, non-participating property owners, all west towers shall be set back from property lines for non-participating property owners, a distance of at least 1.5 times the height of the west, including the blades, which would be about 900 feet, right?
1.5 times.
1.5 times, be about 900.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then go past 4 and 5, then on 6, it says all WEX towers shall be set back a distance of at least 1,000 feet from adjacent property lines participating owners. They may waive that. It sounds to me like it's kind of a penalty to those who are, and if I'm reading it wrong, okay, but it sounds like it's something that's trying to penalize those who are not participating. Why is there a lesser setback from property line for the non-participating than the participating? It looks to me like it's
I
penalizing.
thought that was, yeah.
Well, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know
Yeah.
who came up with that, but unless you can't do math, that just is absurd. If anything, that 1,000 feet for the non-participating should be more. So what was, I don't understand what the commission did. Who brought up the idea, who thought of it, and why it was passed?
And this is the zoning commission proposal?
This
that
is
you're
what,
talking about?
this is what we have for the commission, yeah. And like I say, it's under H, it's number 3, and it's number 6. Unless I'm missing something in there, it just sounds absurd, and it sounds like it's trying to penalize
I've read that twice.
the non-participants. It sounds like you're trying to penalize me because I haven't signed up. Exactly what it sounds like to me. That's what I take from it.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me.
Well, I'm asking why I would be 900-foot setback from my property line when the participating are 1,000, unless I'm reading something wrong in there. And the other thing I don't like is the fact that the distance makes it to where on my property, and I'm talking about south of town here, if one of my kids wants to come back and live there, this setback prevents them from being able to have a house on my property because of the wind turbine. My property. And I know everybody talks about the property rights, say you can do what you want. Yeah, can I set up a strobe and shoot it at your house? My property. I think some of the arguments here, and I agree, should be able to have it, but what about my protection of my land to be able to put a house on my property in the future?
If I'm really trying to be helpful, I think I know what you're talking about. The ordinance says that the siting of the turbine would be under those conditions. It doesn't say that after the turbine is built, that no one can live within 1,000 feet of it.
Yes, it does effectively say that. If I can't build out on my property, setback from the road, because you have setback from the road, then you have
That's a
that.
setback for the tower.
All right, but I'm saying that I can't build my house there without being too close to that tower. And I don't want that. I want to be able to have the tower set back far enough from my property that I can build a house there. That's all. It's my property.
I don't think that's the way it would work. I really don't.
Okay, that's all I'm saying is that you guys are going to go into this and study it. That's one of the questions I want answered because it is my property, and if I want to build a house closer to my property line, I don't want the tower setting closer than the 1,500 feet. And the other thing is, I'd like to know why I have 900 feet and they have 1,000. Because it sounds like you're penalizing me. Somebody put the language in there, penalizing. That's it. And look at it.
By the way, if there was no intent to do that, it could just be an honest mistake. There was no deliberate.
Well, it might have been a mistake, but it's pretty bonehead.
Okay, thank
You
you.
know what? It's easy to make bonehead mistakes, as complicated as this thing was.
Well, that's one, and if you look at it,
You could have been helping us make those.
If anything, it should be at least 1,000 feet or more than 1,000 feet since I'm not participating.
We'll address that.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
another day.
Next, somebody else? Russ?
I just wanted to speak to the process just a little bit, to what Perry stated and also earlier to Gary's statement. I said on the commission also. A couple of things as far as Jim communicating with Bob. I think it's fair to say that, Gary, that you probably had a lot of conversations with Bob that were outside of the commission setting, and everyone was aware of that. And so I don't think that differed any from the process that we used as far as whoever the chairman of the commission or the chairman of this board would have a conversation with Bob that's outside of the meeting setting, because I think that was the norm for the commission. I wanted to speak a little bit, just real quickly. I know you're trying to limit this in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to speak earlier about what Gary said about the board, and I agree with him that everyone defended their opinion on the board. I think the board was firmly 2 people against the wind farm and 2 people for the wind farm, and there was one person that turned out that was the deciding vote and was really unsure about the process that he wanted to go. So it was a 3-2 vote to approve the vote, and the vote to approve it indicated that he wasn't happy with it, but he thought that we had reached an end of the process and wanted to pass it on. And my understanding from him was wanting to pass it on from the standpoint that we were supposed to give a product to the township board, and they were supposed to evaluate our work. And that was my understanding of the process, is that whatever we passed to them, that the board was going to have a responsibility as the elected officials. We were appointed officials, as the elected officials, to evaluate the product that we provided to them. So I do think that the board, the township board, does have a responsibility to debate our work, and especially since obviously our work wasn't a unanimous decision or anything. There is difference of opinion on things. And I have one other thing just that I want to add real briefly here. When we were deciding this on the night that we voted on this, one of the issues I raised was about the possibility of lawsuit. And we as a commission, and Bob instructed this, that our role as a commission was not to consider legal litigation, that would be to the township board to decide that litigation, that was not part of our responsibility. So we did not consider, or maybe we considered ourselves, but in our voting, we were instructed that was not a consideration for us to make any determination about what we were going to do with our product based on whether or not there was going to be litigation.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Correction, a comment and a question.
Oh, go
My
ahead.
name is Richard Knox. The correction is the statement that was made that all taxpayers of the county, of the township, had an opportunity to vote on this matter. I left Newman Township in 1970 to go in the Army. Haven't had a vote in anything here because I don't live here anymore. I've sure been paying a lot of taxes for over 50 years. So we might want to say that taxpayers who reside in the township have a right to vote. A comment. Since I'm a non-voting and non-represented taxpayer, I certainly would hate to see the township board incur additional legal fees by pursuing some course of action, whatever it might be, that would cost us those legal fees if there is no possibility of success of that legal action at some point in the future. The definition of passing an ordinance or passing the zoning commission report, I think, is a very critical point. I think you mentioned, thank you very much for mentioning that point. We don't need any more taxes to be paid for something if it's not going to bring some value. Last of my question, other than to prevent the wind farm from happening, what's the reason that Newman Township needs a zoning commission and a zoning ordinance now in 2018? Have we got somebody trying to come in and set up a trailer park? Set up a hog farm? Run something? I mean, why are we doing this at this particular time?
Because
So
the tax,
I wasn't here, I wasn't involved, sir, at the time the public meeting was held and the electors voted. The actual vote was on adopting a zoning ordinance. It didn't mention the words wind farm or Wex.
Sorry, I
So
spent
it-
too long as a military officer. I cut to the chase real quick.
Yeah.
We all know what's the discussion point here.
We know what the driving
You know,
force was.
What's the driving force for a zoning ordinance and a zoning commission now? Why do we need this? On land that I own in 3 sections in the township, have I got to seek the approval of these 5 people to put tile on that land, to change crop rotation, to apply fertilizer? I don't know, since I haven't seen what the commission has proposed, whether or not I have objections to that, but I'm trying to figure out why we're doing this.
If you were at the meeting, you might have known.
Well, I'm sorry, Jim.
Well, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. You're not here, you don't.
Building ordinance.
That's it. Well,
So
that's why you don't.
So what's the reason that we need a zoning commission and ordinance?
We're dealing with 2018 size turbines on a 2009.
That's a wind farm issue, sir. I'm sorry.
And that's what the board is.
that's what's,
Why does Newman Township need a zoning ordinance and a zoning commission? What are we going to zone? We aren't going to do municipalities or business or things of that type. We're going to do agriculture.
Okay, 3 minutes is up. Thank
Yeah.
you for your comments.
Thank you.
Questions, we appreciate it. Anybody else?
The record shows that my question was not answered.
Why does Malcolm McIntyre need a giant power substation right next to his house? How is that fair? What about his property value that's already happened to it? That's my question. That's my question. And that's beyond even the ICC and what they can allow. So that's just all I'm gonna say, and if anybody can answer that, then that's fine, but I don't think you'd want it next to your house, would you?
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't want it next to my house.
Exactly, and he had no choice. They could have built it a mile away, and not bothered anybody, but they did.
Anything else?
Anybody want it next to your house? Okay, that's what I thought, I just thought I'd
Well, to
look at
answer
it.
your question, there's nothing like this in this township or in this county. So, I mean, once these are built, they're not going down till they're done, you know. We have to do our due diligence to figure out, make sure everything's right before we just let this company come in and do whatever they want to our county.
Thank you, Jay.
Yes.
Maybe I'm misunderstood, but I was at one of the county meetings and Jim Crane stood up and was discussing back and forth that the ordinance that they have at the county was horribly outdated. And so while you'll have zoning, I don't know what things they improved and changed as far as setbacks on homes and bins and things like that. But one of the things you wanted to get in there to give the people of Newman Township a tool to protect themselves when these things go up. I think the setback's like 1,000 feet, and that was for 300-foot machines. So to me, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to do a little bit of zoning so that the people in Newman Township can have a tool to regulate these outfits when they come in. You know, they're finding out overseas right now that the subsonic wind at 4 miles is causing issues with health. I mean, even you folks that are bored up there north of Newman, you ought to, and maybe this is bogus stuff, but the guys in Germany are saying they're a health hazard. Up in Wisconsin, they're saying they're a health hazard. So, I mean, if you do nothing, then you have no tools. You're just out on your own. You know, you don't have a thing to fight with. And that's just, you know, looks to me like that would be the answer. No, I don't think you want to regulate fertilizer, and you don't want to regulate a lot of things. You know, I would say the majority of your county rules and regulations are just fine, but some of them aren't up to date, and that's one of them is this wind turbine thing. It's just not up to date. That's all.
Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment.
Okay.
Why do you people all think we don't need an ordinance when this Ford County right now is rewriting their ordinance? And one of the board members actually put an article in the paper. His house is 2,500 foot away, and he said that is too damn close. I mean, it was in the News Gazette. So why these people? And a lot of these people complaining don't live here. I live up there. I want to be in the middle of this crap. So don't give me the story, you know, about what's the crap. It's not. We need something done to regulate it. I'm not saying you can't have one. I'm just saying we need some kind of ordinance.
That it? Great. Thank you. Anybody else? If not, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that
from Mark,
motion.
second.
Second.
Second from Jake. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Everybody, thank you for coming. Appreciate your input.